The biggest concern for most Detroit Lions fans going into next football season is the defensive side of the ball. Many fans will point to the fact that over the final month of the season, with the exception of the Minnesota Vikings game, the Lions defense was one of, if not the worst units in football. They allowed 31 points to Green Bay, 48 points to Buffalo. They allowed 35 points to San Francisco, and of course capped it off with a divisional round loss at home while allowing 45 points to a Washington Commanders team that probably should not have been there to begin with. They got devastated at home. They were embarrassed on the defensive side of the ball. And regardless of the number of injuries they had, many fans go into next season really concerned about the defensive side of the ball. Not a lot of additions were made, and the ones that were more to replace the outgoing talent than to improve upon the talent that was already there. And to their point, those fans have a good point. At the end of the season, the Lions were not very good on the defensive side of the ball. They were allowing nearly 32 points per game, and they just weren't able to get off the field. They weren't able to really impact the game significantly in a positive way. And that left a bad taste in most fans' mouths. But what they fail to realize is that from weeks 1 to 13, the Detroit Lions were one of the best defenses in football. They were allowing very few points. They were taking the football away. They were getting off the field, and they were the reason that the Detroit Lions won a number of football games throughout the early stages of the season. And that defense is the one that will be returning to Detroit in 2025. And I'm going to prove it to you. Now, going back to last season, everybody remembers the offense. Number 1 overall, number 2 in passing, number 6 in rushing, number 1 in scoring. And in fact, they were the highest scoring team ever in the 17-game era of the NFL season. They scored more points than any team ever since the NFL schedule expanded to 17 games. But what a lot of people don't remember is how good the defense was. Now, looking overall, it wasn't fantastic for the season. The number 13th overall, 30th against the pass, 5th against the run, but 22nd in yards per attempt against them, and 7th in points allowed. So while they were giving up a lot of yards, and they were certainly giving up a lot of first downs and long drives, they weren't giving up points. They were forcing teams to settle for field goals. They were forcing teams off the field in big, crucial moments, or they were taking the football away. They ranked really highly in the NFL a season ago with takeaways, and averaged a takeaway and a half throughout the entirety of the season overall. Now, the injury concerns were massive for this team, right? You have Aidan Hutchinson, Alim McNeill, Carlton Davis, Alex Anzalone, Derrick Barnes, Malcolm Rodriguez, Ifeatu Melifonwu, and so many other players on injury reserves a season ago, to the point where there was, points in the season where they were hiring and signing guys like Quan Alexander, who played just 3 days later. They signed Jamal Adams, who played just 7 days after signing and started for them on Thursday Night Football. It was to the point where they were literally signing players off the couch to start for them and play crucial roles in massive division rivalry games in prime time selections. Now, what a lot of people don't remember about the early season Detroit Lions is that their defense was really good. Through the first 5 weeks of the season, when they were relatively healthy, they were 4-1. They allowed just 330 yards per game. They allowed just 18.2 points per game and averaged 2 takeaways per game throughout the first month and a bit of the season. Now, after week 5, of course, disaster struck. Aidan Hutchinson went down with injuries. That's where it really seemed to start stacking up for the Detroit Lions. After that, players like Alex Anzalone got hurt, Carlton Davis got hurt, Derrick Barnes got hurt in week 3, and so many other crucial members of this roster just went down with season-ending injuries and kind of left the Detroit Lions out to dry. However, despite that, through the first 13 weeks of the NFL season with a bye, the Detroit Lions were 11-1. They allowed just 298 yards per game. They allowed just 15 points per game. And in 9 of their 12 contests, they allowed less than 21 points. They averaged a takeaway and a half per game throughout that stretch. And despite losing Aidan Hutchinson in that span, despite losing Derrick Barnes, despite losing Marcus Davenport, despite losing a lot of quality players, they actually got better from week 6 to week 13, bringing down their points per game, bringing down their yards allowed per game, and of course, not allowing more than 21 points more than 3 times in that stretch of games. The issue arose in weeks 14 to 17. Alex Anzalone had since gone down. Carlton Davis was lost for the season. Several Detroit Lions players were no longer available, and it went from being, okay, Aidan Hutchinson, the star, is out, but we have enough talent to back it up, to Now Aidan Hutchinson's out. Now Alim McNeill is out. Now Carlton Davis is out. Now Alex Anzalone's out, and Derrick Barnes is out. And every leader, every super capable player outside of Jack Campbell in the front seven was really significantly injured or was done for this season with a major injury. And as such, from weeks 14 to 17, the Detroit Lions struggled mightily. They allowed 32.5 points per game, 429 yards per game. They had just 5 takeaways in that time span, which is still more than a takeaway per game, but they allowed 30 points per game or more in 3 of their 4 contests. Now, the Detroit Lions still went 3-1 in this period. They still had the offensive firepower to fight back, and they were one of the best teams in football in this stretch, despite what the defense was giving them. However, as I said, it came to a head when the divisional round rolled in, and they allowed 45 points, 481 yards, and didn't get a single takeaway on the day. So, yes, the Detroit Lions defense towards the end of the year was really poor. Towards the last month of the season, with the exception of Minnesota, they were not a very good football team, and that is really concerning. But when you take a look at weeks 1 through 13, even weeks 1 through 5, you can see that the defense has the talent to be successful. You can see the defense has the schematics in place to be successful. And when they aren't playing guys right off the street, when they're not starting Ezekiel Turner at linebacker, they're not starting Miles Adams as your defensive tackle, Broderick Martin isn't your starting nose tackle for a game, the Detroit Lions defense is actually quite good, and despite that really tough stretch towards the end of the season, they still finished as a top 10 unit in points allowed on the year. Now, the Detroit Lions did add throughout the offseason. It may have not been a lot, but it was a little bit. DJ Reed comes in to essentially replace what Carlton Davis was for the Detroit Lions. They drafted Tyleik Williams in the first round of the NFL draft. Roy Lopez, Avonte Maddox, Rock Ya-Sin add really incredible depth in the secondary as well as the defensive line. And the Lions spent a lot of their money this offseason building up that depth. Because, as I mentioned, they have the star power. They have the stars at every level. They have the Pro Bowlers and the All-Pros on this team. What really let them down a season ago was lack of depth, and they faced a historic amount of injuries to the point where depth really didn't matter at that point. But now they are really deep. They have 6 to 7 defensive tackles they feel comfortable playing in a game. They have 6 to 7 cornerbacks, 3 to 4 safeties. They have 7 linebackers at this point with starting experience in the NFL, and that is where they really decided to put a lot of their capital this year. You aren't going to upgrade over Aidan Hutchinson. You aren't going to upgrade in your secondary. You really aren't going to upgrade in your linebacking core from what the Lions already have in place. And even taking a look at the defensive line, you're not going to get better than Aidan Hutchinson. You're not going to find better than Alim McNeill. You're not going to get much better than DJ Reader. And even if you could, Tyleik Williams is going to be a fantastic defensive tackle 3 next year. You could upgrade at edge rusher for sure, but the Detroit Lions were fine as a pass rush. They ranked 4th in the NFL in pressures a season ago. And again, that lack of pass rush in quotes didn't hurt the Detroit Lions as much as many people believe that it did. On top of that, the Detroit Lions will be returning several key players, including Aidan Hutchinson, including Marcus Davenport and Derrick Barnes and Anzalone to be 100% healthy, Montgomery to be 100% healthy, Malcolm Rodriguez and Alim McNeill around Thanksgiving, and Mekhi Wingo at some point during the season. They will return so much talent to that front 7, so much talent to that defensive side of the ball that they are going to look much closer to their weeks 1 to 13 selves than they will to their final month selves, right? Because that final month really was the outlier. That wasn't, oh, this is what the Detroit Lions really look like on defense. This is what happens when Aaron Glenn gets figured out. This is what happens when, they stop getting lucky with turnovers. No, weeks 1 through 13, the far greater sample size is what the Detroit Lions defense looks like. That is who the Detroit Lions are as a defensive team, and they will continue to do so. Now, going into next season, their defensive success is predicated almost entirely on their talent. Aaron Glenn, for as good of a coach as he was at preparing players for games and trusting his players to do their jobs, the scheme wasn't complicated, right? It was man coverage. It was press man across the board. Sometimes they blitzed, sometimes they didn't. It was not a complicated system, right? You could have a lot of announcers talking about, oh, how simple the scheme is, but how effective it is. It's not a style that many offenses are used to playing, and the Detroit Lions are one of the few defenses that can get away with it. They're physical at the line of scrimmage. They press you, they blitz you, they put pressure on the quarterback, and they force turnovers and they force mistakes. That defense has the talent to continue continue doing that. And Kelvin Shepherd trained for many, many years under Aaron Glenn, right? He is prepared to take up the mantle and continue to do what Aaron Glenn was doing a season ago. So despite being a very simple style of defense, it is a very effective style of defense. And there's no reason the Detroit Lions should not be running the same defensive scheme and very similar concepts to what they were a season ago. Kelvin Shepherd will not be a step back from the defensive coordinator position because the scheme is easy. The scheme is easy to translate. It's easy to call. And Kelvin Shepherd has been in the system for 3 seasons who have been calling the defense with Aaron Glenn. He's been a massive part of what the front seven does. He's been a massive part into the success the defense has seen. And all of that talent returning is going to be a massive boost for what they were at the end of the year. The Detroit Lions, from where they were in that final month to week 1, will be returning a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, several starting members of the defensive line, multiple members of the secondary, 4 linebackers with starting experience in that linebacking room, and the entire defense will be returning upwards of 14 players that the Lions relied on and trust to play in key moments and massive situations. The defense will be good next year. And I think a lot of people have kind of a bad taste in their mouth. They have kind of flashbacks and really bad horror stories of what happened against Buffalo, what happened against San Francisco, what happened against Washington. But those games were the outliers. Those games last season weren't typically what the Detroit Lions were putting on display. And what was going on before, from weeks 1 to week 13, that week 18 matchup versus Minnesota, that is what the Lions put on the field. That is the kind of defense we will see every single week if they stay healthy. And that is why I think the Lions offseason was fine. That's why I don't think they needed to spend big money on an edge rusher. It's why they don't need to trade for Trey Hendrickson. They don't need a player even like Zadarius Smith from free agency because they're fine. They were fine throughout the entirety of the season. They were fine even when facing massive injuries, and they will be okay next season, if not better next season. They have the talent to be the best defense in football in 2025. They have elite talent at all 3 levels. They have a great coach with great opportunities to take this defense to even another level to where Aaron Glenn had it. This defense will be good. I would be shocked if they weren't a top 10 unit. I would be slightly surprised if they weren't a top 5 unit. And quite honestly, I would not be shocked if they were the best defense in football in points allowed. They are talented enough to do it. They are well coached enough to do it. They put together a great coaching staff for this team, and the defense is going to be good. Will it carry the Detroit Lions? Probably not. The offense is still very talented and should still be the powerhouse of this team, but if the offense takes a natural step back next season and they're even a top 5 to top 10 unit, the Detroit Lions defense is going to improve more than the Lions offense is going to regress. And that is going to make them a more well-rounded team that is going to lead to a ton of victories next season and very much leaves their Super Bowl window open. So with all of that being said, that is all for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below your opinions on the Lions defense. Do you think it's good enough to win a Super Bowl? Do you trust the first 13 weeks as opposed to the final 5? I'd love to hear your guys' opinions. But with all of that being said, thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions!